Mr. Crosby here with another exciting video taking you through a GCSE mock exam. How thrilling. Okay, and here we've got June 2012 GCSE mock. It's for the interwars period. We're going to be looking at question 2 on that paper. Okay, it's all about the League of Nations. Now on this paper, the question 2, question 3 are the same. You choose between the two of them, and you have to do parts A, B and C. Okay, we're going to take one at a time. Start with A because it's easy peasy. What were the successes of the League of Nations in the 1920s? 4 marks. It's really, really easy to mark. Okay, you get 4 details gets you your 4 marks. Okay, although if you did develop a point, then you would also get it. So if a supporting detail can also get a mark on this one. So for example, I could get up to 2 marks on the episode Greece and Bulgaria accepting the League order of a ceasefire. And I could also say that Greece agreed to pay compensation to Bulgaria over the incident. Okay, so I've really got 2 details on the same thing. I can't go beyond that. Okay, do however notice that you can't just say Upper Silesia, okay, or Greece and Bulgaria. You have to say what actually happened. But the reality of this question is, if you know your stuff, if you just know the topic, then all you need to do then is get down 4 details and you got yourself the marks, okay? Now, part B, explain why the League was successful in the 1920s. 6 marks. We're back to our old explain question, okay? And as everybody should know by now, for the full marks, 6 out of 6 in this case, we need to explain 2 reasons, okay? Let's just very quickly recap some of the lower levels. Okay, level 2 or 3 marks if I'm just identifying or describing the reasons. Okay, so in this case, its decisions were accepted. Okay, disputes were often between smaller countries. Okay, not yet having to deal with some of the larger powers in the world. We're not into Manchuria, Abyssinia, even Nazi Germany yet. Okay, war just ended. No one wants hostility. Okay, and you might be thinking, well, hang on, these are all valid reasons, and that's correct. But if I'm just identifying what the reasons were, then I'm not explaining. And the rule of thumb I always say is, if I can still ask the question why, okay, if I'm still left asking that question, well, why did that mean that the League was successful? Then I've not explained, I've just identified the reasons. Okay, so we've got to go beyond that and actually show why these things here led to success for the League. Okay, now if we're going to explain our reasons, if we do just one reason, we're going to get 4 or 5 marks. The difference between those two is if it's a developed explanation, it's going to get the 5 marks. Okay, let's have a look at a developed explanation here. So, most of the disputes in this period involved smaller nations and they accepted more readily the League of Nations judgment. For example, Finland and Sweden were in a dispute over the Åland Islands 1920. The League studied the case and both countries accepted the League's decision. Okay, so notice that in this case, most of the disputes in this period involved smaller nations and they accepted more readily the League of Nations judgment. Well, that is basically what we'd expect to see in this bracket here. Okay, however, we've got some evidence, some precise evidence. Okay, Finland and Sweden were in a dispute. The League studied the case. Both countries accepted the League's decision. Okay, so we've got a further explanation here, and this helps support our first statement. Okay, now for 6 marks, it says explain 2 reasons. The maxim doesn't specify any difference between developed and basic explanations in this case, but I highly recommend that students come up with 2 developed reasons, okay? So here we need 2 reasons explained, okay? So there we go, 2 reasons explained. So what we need to do at this stage is to pause the video. If you're working as a pair, I want you to compare your answers and see how you both did. Or you can just study your own again. Try and think about what mark you got and why that might be. Okay, did you have your 2 reasons? Okay, how were you in supporting it, developing it? Did you have? Did you leave the person reading the question asking why, or had you actually included some evidence to back it up and shown why this actually led to success, rather than leaving the person guessing? Okay, so off you go, try and come up with some targets to take into your next question. Okay, we're now on to question C, okay, and this is the money question. Okay, this is where we get most of our marks. In fact, half the marks for the whole question fall on question C. So if you're in an exam deciding what question, is it going to be 2, is it going to be 3, is it going to be question 5, is it going to be question 6, okay, I want to be thinking about how well can I answer this 10-mark question, because that is where most of the marks come from, okay? So that should be what I decide on, okay? Now, question C, we can see here a key phrase at the start, how far, okay? You're going to get a phrase like how far or to what extent, okay? And you need to explain your answer, okay? So we are looking at a how far type question. It's going to require balance, okay? We're going to need to present both sides of the argument, and we're going to need to be ready to explain, justify both our arguments, okay? So in this case, we've got how far was the organisation and structure of the league responsible for its failure in the 1930s, okay? So really what this question is asking you about is, why did the league fail in the 1930s? And you're going to get a whole host of questions phrased differently, but they're actually asking the same thing, okay? And that is, what were the different reasons for the league's failure, and which was the most important, okay? So I'm going to need a paragraph on organisation and the structure being responsible for the league's failure, but I'm also going to need some other paragraphs arguing for other reasons for its failure as well, okay? Now if we look at level 2 to 3 marks, okay, all this is focusing on, 1, we're only focusing on the organisation and the structure, but we're also only identifying or describing reasons. We're not doing that explain part that we're going to need to get the higher marks, okay? So if we look at these, okay, the Permanent Court of International Justice could not force members to accept its rulings, okay? Why did that lead to the failure of the league in the 1930s? It's not making it clear. The assembly only met once a year. The council members had a veto. It did not have an army. Slowness of operation. Okay, these are all important reasons for the league's failure, all linked to its structure, but we're not explaining why. For example, the council had a veto. That meant that people in the council could serve their own interests, and a single member could cause problems for action. It's also linked to the slowness of operation, okay? Slowness of operation is actually linked to some of the other episodes we're going to look at in a minute. Manchuria, Abyssinia, the league not responding quickly enough allowed things to get out of control, okay? But what I'm not doing here is stating all this stuff, okay? I'm just saying some reasons without showing why it's linked to the failure. Now if we look at level 3, what I'm going to need for 4 to 6 marks, okay, I'm going to need explanation, okay. Like those 6, 8 mark explain questions, okay, this is taking it beyond just identifying the reasons, but I'm showing how it's linked. For example, major countries were not in the League. It meant that economic sanctions were not effective. In 1931, when Japan invaded Manchuria, sanctions were not seriously considered because Japan would continue trading with the USA. This is a lot more than just stating major countries were not in the League, okay? It's showing the consequences and even giving precise examples to back it up, okay? This is a developed reason. So, first thing we're going to need for this type of question is developed reasons, okay? In this case, for failure, but it would depend on the question, obviously, okay? So that's our first thing that we're going to need. Now in level 3, I'm identifying either or. Okay, I'm either identifying why organisation and structure of the League was a problem, or why something else was a problem. Okay, level 4, I'm simply doing both. Okay, and so have I got a range of different reasons for this? You can see here the depression is identified as a major cause of the failure of the League in the 1930s. Wall Street crash in 1929 causes all sorts of problems. Economies that are starting to recover can no longer do so. The Dawes Plan goes down the tube, and it means that countries, rather than being encouraged to trade, are now going to have less incentive and therefore be more likely to fight one another. Okay, so I could be identifying that. I could be, rather than linking the organisation structure of the League to the failures of Manchuria and Abyssinia, I could actually be also looking at those as individual cases. Okay, regardless of how the League responded, okay, we're still dealing with two powerful countries that decide that they're not going to play ball with the League, okay? So, not only am I going to need my developed reasons, but I'm also going to need to present reasons in a balanced way. So I need to argue for and against the statement. Okay, so that's my next job. Notice that this must have balance, okay? It's not enough for me to just put a token argument in there to give both sides of the argument, okay? Both sides must be well argued, okay? I need to be arguing for and against. I'm capped at 8 marks if I haven't given both sides of the argument a just hearing. So let's make sure we also include balance in our arguments there. Okay, so I'm going to just put balance down there to remind us. And then finally, for that elusive 10 marks, okay, 10 marks, I need to be thinking about how far. Okay, so this isn't a case of making it one-sided. It's taking into account all the arguments and finally reaching a conclusion as to what the biggest reason for, in this case, the failure of the League in the 1930s was. Okay, so reach an overall conclusion is what I need to do, and it's got to have some sort of evaluation in there. And I always tell my students to make sure it's justified. Okay, justified overall conclusion. Okay. So there we go. Right, and the reason I say it must be justified, let's just shift these things around a little bit. Okay, the reason I say it must be justified is just in case, okay, this one is a very tricky one for the examiners to mark, but just in case the examiner is feeling picky, make sure that you've not simply just recited what you've already said about one side of the argument. So if I've already said that the biggest reason was the depression, and I've given reasons for the depression causing problems, I don't just recite that again. What I need to be doing is saying why that was a bigger reason than the other reasons. Okay, I could be looking at something like, well, the depression led to the other problems. Okay, you could say that the depression was the root cause for countries like Japan wanting to gain territory, wanting to gain resources, etc., not cooperating on the international stage. Okay, so that justified bit is absolutely key in your final conclusion. Okay, that brings us to the end. Stop the video now, and what you need to be doing is, again, go back into your pairs if you're working with them, or on your own if you are working on your own. Look at your answer, see what mark you got, see if you can figure out what you would do differently in this question, and come up with some targets to take into the next 10-mark question that you end up doing. Okay, and make sure that you apply those targets. That's really key. And finally, you might want to just have a go at maybe redrafting and writing out one of the questions again with those targets applied, so that you can see the difference between your original answer and one that would be achieving higher, maybe even full marks. Okay, so off you go, and thanks for listening.